everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So excited for today's conversation, reclaiming reality, Gen Z, tech, and the future of digital well-being. It's such an important conversation topic to explore, and I can't think of a better person to explore it with than today's guest. But before we dive into it, I want to talk a little bit about the context of this conversation, right? I think we all know that we're living in a very digitally connected world, but what does that mean, and what are the implications of that? So, we do know we live truly in a digitized world. Our lives have become very much immersed in tech, almost, inseparable, right? I'm connected to technology right now as I'm talking to you. I'm sure most individuals would agree they use technology on a daily basis. It is a part of the way that we interact with the world, from our social lives to the way that we work. It is redefining human interaction and our daily experiences. The impacts of that are still unknown to a degree, right? We are still figuring out what are the long-term implications of a digitized world. And as a generation, Gen Z is really that first generation that is growing up with this very digital world. We are the digital native generation. And so we are disproportionately impacted by both the positives and the negatives of this new reality. In fact, when polled, 27% of Gen Z users, according to McKinsey, report negative impacts from social media and tech use on their mental health, which is a staggering number. How then do we build healthier relationships with the technology we use today? And how can we learn to log off from our devices to strike a balance between engagement and mental health? We're excited to dive into this conversation around digital wellness, the tools needed to build healthier digital spaces, and how Gen Z plays a critical role in addressing this issue. Really excited to welcome our guest today in this conversation, who is truly an amazing Gen Z leader who is helping lead the charge as we address the need to build healthier relationships with the tech around us. Really excited to introduce Tariq Lawal, Director of Creative Media and Communications at Log Off Movement, a youth-led nonprofit organization dedicated to helping younger generations build healthier relationships with social media and technology that they use every day through efforts aimed at tackling social isolation and loneliness, an incredibly important topic. Logoff's resources and community engagement encourage youth agency and tech intentionality that help users find a balanced relationship with the tech they use in their lives. From helping run Logoff's Creative Fellows program and working closely with young people to build awareness around digital wellness, Tariq's work is a testament to the power of Gen Z-led advocacy in the tech space, something that we truly appreciate seeing. He's not only creating impact, he's helping educate Gen Z and providing them with the tools needed to build healthier digital spaces. Tariq, it's so nice to welcome you to this conversation. So excited to have you today and so appreciative of your time in helping us make this work. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction, Jose. I'm super excited to basically just engage in this conversation about digital wellness and basically how young people are making use of technology, especially in our digitally connected world where the first generation has grown up with all these devices and being able to connect with each other on the internet and basically just like stay connected, but also like the implications of the rise of excessive technological use and algorithmic social media.
Yeah, well, we are so excited to have you and just so thankful for your time because the work you're doing is really at the forefront of this question. And so we really couldn't think of anyone better to join us for this conversation. We're touching on it a little bit, and I'm happy to dive right into the conversation with you by exploring a little bit about this new reality that we're facing, particularly our generation. I say our generation, I think we're probably a little bit kind of on separate ends of the generation. But we are the first true generation of digital natives, right? Spending hours on average a day on our phones, leading a lot of the growth in major social media platforms. How How did that come about? Like as a generation that grew up with this technology, like how did we get so entrenched, would you say, in tech being a part of our daily lives?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because obviously we can't talk about this issue without looking back at how it all came to be. In the early 2000s, we didn't really have like much of like the kind of social media we have now. Early social networking, like internet networking platforms was mostly on the web, and you really had to be on your computer to basically connect with people from around the world. Like, and even back then, like the social networks that people could access was mostly used by a very like few and specific set of people. And I feel like the first like type of social network that was really popular back in the day was like MySpace. It was like one of like the early like forms of like social media that people had. Eventually, Mark Zuckerberg back at Harvard University started developing Facebook, and I feel like the goal that Mark Zuckerberg was trying to like achieve in the early days of Facebook was basically connecting people. But now we can see that Facebook has gone away from that mission. Not only Facebook, but every other platform that basically came after it or got acquired by Meta. And I do believe that in the early days, digital devices were mostly for like a specific group of people. So most of the people that were connected to the internet oftentimes were mostly people in developed nations, and also had like access to computers, so they had like a lot of time to basically use social networking platforms and websites. But eventually, with the rise of like the iPhones, like more people started getting personal iPhones. Then Instagram came about, and more people got an Instagram. Then at some point, I felt during the pandemic, we got introduced algorithmic social media. Well, before the pandemic, TikTok had a previous version called Musically, but later on, it got transformed into TikTok by the parent company ByteDance.
Mhm.
And during that period of time, that was like the boom of like algorithmic social media. Because before then, if you notice, like the early days of Instagram, it was more of like a chronological sort of like order where basically you didn't really see posts from like people that you didn't follow or people you weren't like in community with. It was mostly about like connecting with people you already knew in your everyday life. And in 20 during the pandemic, or pre-coronavirus pandemic, that really transformed, and it became like a culture of like performance and excessive, just basically like an excessive culture of like reliance on digital devices, and we just like made it too a part of our like everyday life. And during the coronavirus, most of our time we spent most of our time indoors. No socializing didn't happen much. And in so many countries there were lockdowns. There were basically a lot of people had to quarantine, so we were doing like Zoom meetings, online classes. So basically our lives got really digital during that period of time. And it was also the time where more people started seeing social media as a form of third space. More people were, joining Discord communities, making friends off of, LinkedIn, Instagram. So it basically became like a core part of our lives because like we weren't allowed to basically just like socialize as we used to pre-pandemic. And after that, it just became an issue of like it became like a new culture. We didn't really return back to our old ways of like interacting with people, socializing, making friends, hanging out in third spaces. It became, let me post this and impress my 2,000 followers on Instagram, or what does this person have going on Twitter? And we became like, it became I would definitely say this new era is like an era of like digital performance where it's not just like an attention economy where the platforms are trying to just like get your attention and keep you on the platforms as possible to get as much money from advertisers. It's also, they also want you to perform on the platform, which is basically why social media moved from the we're trying to connect you, we're trying to get you closer to your friends, to build an audience, build a personal brand, perform for strangers on the internet. So it just like got
Right.
there, and that
Yeah.
has had like a huge impact on an entire generation.
Yeah. So I want to break that down because that's a lot of information I think is really interesting to dive into. So you're kind of naming this evolution, right? Kind of like staged or tiered evolution of social media here, which I think is important to touch on, particularly for those folks in the generation that maybe don't remember like a time before Facebook or a time before MySpace. I'm just old enough to remember like a pre-MySpace world. I remember having a MySpace. I remember kind of like jumping then onto like Facebook and, seeing that evolution, as you said, from like a very localized community building platform that then started to centralize and like root itself in algorithm based content to kind of promote a performance style, which I think, to your point, was then like exacerbated by the pandemic, by our inability to connect in person, and then further driven by what I would call kind of this, very rapidly developing like creator economy, right? I think all of these things have driven this like performative, centralized, audience brand based social media world. So I think that's kind of what you're encapsulating like initially here, which is fascinating, because then that begs the question, like, are social media companies just like marketing and brand like platforms now? Like, are they not a means, like, of a valid means of connecting with other individuals? And is that why we're seeing younger folks now move to certain platforms that are a little bit more like raw and avoid some of that marketing, like discourse groups or like, Slack groups? Like, I'm assuming that's kind of what you're seeing now with younger folks. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I definitely think now that a lot of people have basically seen that social media has really transformed, and it's no longer about like getting people to get connected. It's more about, getting people to build an audience or
Mm,
get people to stay on the platform as possible. And it's more of like a sort of like, now it's more of a creator and passive user dichotomy where you're either a
mm,
creator or you're a passive user, which
mhm,
is basically like why the issue of Meta basically using the TikTok model on their own platforms, because in the early days of Instagram, you basically only were following people you knew, and you could
mhm,
only like see photos. And Instagram transformed when TikTok became a thing, and they introduced Reels, and you can now start seeing videos, and more people are encouraged to become content creators. Start making vlogs, start making a day in my life content. And there were different platforms for those kind of things. Like TikTok was quite different. Instagram was quite different. YouTube served a different purpose for long form content. But now, if you look at the platforms, you notice that they're all feel the same, because like now it feels like they're all serving the same purpose, because now YouTube has introduced shorts. And I do
mhm,
believe that one of the major problems of like short form content is basically that some of the short form content you see, they basically, they sometimes they lack nuance. They're just like something that is created to be like easily digestible, and it has also really affected the attention spans of so many young
mhm,
people. A recent, countless studies have showed that people who watch too much short form content eventually just like have a decline in an ability to critically think and a very low attention span. And you can see like countless like studies say that attention spans are declining significantly, which is a
mhm,
major problem in itself. But I definitely feel like as young people start to realize, Instagram is more focused on, the creators, the people who are very comfortable with sharing their life, making video content. And I feel like the reason why this has been the new model for like a lot of the social media apps is mostly with the fact that they're not focused on connecting people anymore. It's more of, appeasing their shareholders and basically making as much profit as possible. So they basically shifted their model, which was earlier connecting people, make as much friends as you can,
mhm,
to basically trying to build an audience, build a personal brand, and they basically shifted the model. Now, if you scroll on Instagram, for every two posts, you're definitely going to come across an ad. You're definitely going to come across, a content creator you don't even follow, a lot of suggested content, a lot of AI generated content, and they basically the basic like function of social media in the early days was to basically connect people with one another, and that basically evolved from connecting people into basically just like making money off of people's attention, which is why the term attention economy was formed, because
mhm,
now this social media platforms are more focused on making money off of our attention. So if the more attention they're able to take away from you, the more time you spend on these platforms, the more time you spend scrolling, the more money they can basically make from you.
Yeah.
So I think as people saw this money and realized, wait, social media is no longer about like connecting the everyday, just like usual people. They basically just like checked out, like, yeah, I think social media is not for me. So a lot of people barely even post. I know a lot of like
Mm.
friends who have not posted on Instagram in years. I know people who basically just like ditched like every meta app and said, yeah, social media is not really it. It's and basically you barely even see like people in your everyday life anymore.
Mm. So to me, like that, there's a question that comes up there as well, right? To explore, which is when when there's such a refocus and shift on the part of so many like platforms to drive revenue and to focus on like creator economies that are adding to like their marketing strategies, their ability to drive folks to market on these platforms, which is how they generate the majority of their revenue, right? And that and like data collection. Where is there and is there like value that you would identify for being a generation that is truly probably the first very very like internationally connected generation? We're speaking right now on opposite sides, almost opposite sides of the world, which is pretty phenomenal. Do you find value in social media in a maybe an altruistic way of wanting to kind of see it go back to connecting people for the sake of connecting people? Like, is that a part of kind of the vision you would have for reshaping the way that these platforms are kind of driving people to connect with each other?
Yeah, definitely. I do think that I definitely want a social media that makes people feel good. So basically, this
Mm-hmm.
week I interacted with somebody who's currently working building a social media app. It's called Nuts. Anybody that wants to check it out, you should definitely check it out. It's an app that basically wants to go back to the old model of social media, which is basically to connect people. And she basically said the social media we have now is more focused on making profit off of people, and it makes people feel bad because it fosters comparison culture. It fosters like FOMO, which is basically the fear of missing out. It also just like an article I read said now the social media we have now is making money off of the culture, envy, and the fact that people oftentimes feel dissatisfied with their lives based off of like the things they come across on the internet. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel like the social media we have now is too profit focused that they find it hard to go back to the old days of basically the old days of like, oh, we're about connecting, make new friends.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on Facebook now, it's a totally different platform. Most of the content you see are like sponsored content or like promotional news, or you rarely even see content about like people in your everyday life. And a recent article I also read in the Atlantic basically said we're now living in an era of like posting and why, which is basically like people don't feel like posting. Like there's just like this like people feeling tired and not like exhausted with like social media because it feels like performance now, and it's just like not something they really want to put their energy anymore. And I definitely think that social media has really changed. Like I know the early days of like Instagram because I started using Instagram in I think middle school. I think that was the first time I created my first account. And back then it was mostly just like about like interacting with your friends. You didn't really care about like reaching as many people as possible, or you didn't really care about passing a message. It was mostly about like, oh, your friends at your school, or like your family members. Like it wasn't really about like reaching like a broad audience. But like now social media is about that due to like TikTok being a thing. It's just like algorithmic social media. The main goal of algorithmic social media is to basically for you to get the most likes, the most like comments, validation as possible. And it's just like created this culture where people are mostly focused on like optimizing and creating content and churning out as much content and information out there as possible to basically just like get attention. And we live in a generation where Gen Z is basically seeing their friends being content creators, this person having 100,000 likes based off of like doing this. And it just like creates this like unnecessary pressure that we should all be performing, when in reality not everybody should be a content creator. Like it's totally fine if you only want to post like cat pics, or pictures of your dinner to your immediate friends. Like you don't really need to perform or try to be a content creator or this or that. And I also feel like social media platforms now, they no longer have their business model is not focused on basically connecting people anymore. In their marketing, Meta can still say, oh, we're focused on connecting you, but in reality, now it's more focused on like giving people a platform to express themselves and gather an audience, and that's totally fine. Social media has changed so many people's lives. Social media has, is decentralized. How we can discover people. Like for example, if you're talent in the past, like you had to wait for somebody to find you, but now with social media, anybody from anywhere can basically express themselves, and it has also helped young advocates like me. Now, young advocates like me can just like get on social media, talk about the issues they care about, and also build an audience or community of people that actually support the cause they care about. So I'm not going to go around and say, oh, social media serves no purpose. It serves a purpose. People have found community through social media. People make money off of social media. There's so many young people who would have been unemployed if social media wasn't a thing, and they started making money off of like creating social media content. So social media has served like so many incredible purposes, but unfortunately, with every great thing, there's a pro, and there's also there are definitely going to be cons. And the
Mm-hmm.
cons of social media has also created a society where young people feel a need to perform, and it's also like just worsen like comparison. And also, I do say this a lot. We're not meant to consume this much content in one day. Like
Yeah.
our brains, like in the past, like our ancestors weren't consuming like this much information. In one day you're going to consume news about like what is going on in New York City, and what politician did that, what what recent policy the Trump administration is considering, what this influencer from Nevada is doing, what is going on in Dubai, the Israel Palestine situation. It's basically like too much information for one person to consume in one day, which has like just like led to basically just like overstimulation, because you're constantly bombarded with different content. And for each content requires different emotions. You scroll and you see a video of somebody celebrating a major milestone. Maybe they graduated from college, or they got into their dream school, or they got a job, and you scroll again and you basically see another devastating news. Somebody got laid off, or
Yeah.
somebody is stuck in a really difficult life situation. So it's basically just like emotional labor and overstimulation. And now we have young
Mm.
people who are dealing with more mental health related issues based off of the fact that social media is no longer serving that purpose of like connection. It's more of like a media. It's basically a media platform now, because like social media doesn't
Yeah.
even really care about like is anybody connected. Less young people are posting casually. Like there are countless like articles and opinion pieces are like what happened to
Mm.
casual posting. Less young people are interacting and making any new friends off of social media. Now it's more of
Mm.
like you go on social media to perform, to create, to share, to express yourself. It's no longer about like, oh, it's a place for you to make new friends or connect with the friends you already
Mm.
have. So the business model has totally shifted, and I just love the fact that there are new like startups and initiatives that are really focused on like creating like a new type of social media, and a social media that really just like makes make people feel good. And I definitely think like with my experience, I have definitely gotten the chance to come across like amazing builders and innovators from around the world. We're currently thinking of focus on addressing these issues. Like Meta is not doing the best job, so we really need to step in and make like human-centered social media and public
Yeah.
interest like social media.
I, I
And
I wanna try to like um, tackle some of these points because I think they're so interesting, right? Like and you're bringing up like the potential shortcomings of larger social media companies that are now like our legacy social media companies, right? Like that have been here, like Meta, Facebook, coming up on like 20 years, right? Of kind of like broad like like customer bases, right? These legacy platforms, which is interesting to kind of hear them in that term, but not being as people centric as they've like built out these like incredible revenue structures, being as large as they are, and the value in having a new generation of platforms, which I'm excited to hear some of the names of like some of the ones that you're following particularly, that are getting everybody, including some of these legacy platforms, to consider where is their priority and what is it that people want. I think this is exciting in a way, because there's kind of an organicness to this, right? Like you have a generation of builders that came up and built platforms, and then built a model, built like revenue models, and then like a social response, right? Like, and we can get into the topics of like burnout, fatigue, anxiety, stress, like depression, by like the way that these models were created and the impacts of like on the users. And now there's that counter response by like new builders, right? Like a new generation of builders. And I'm wondering, like, is that organic? Is that like to be expected in the evolution of the way that we're creating people focused social media platforms across generations? And as we're like creating better iterations of like platform models, like is this what comes as like new industries come up in society? And I'm wondering if there's an example, maybe like cars, like is the example that comes to mind, like when cars were invented, right? Like we didn't have like regulatory frameworks, like folks didn't have speed limits, like roads did not have like standardized like, construction regulation. We didn't use seat belts, and so it was a difficult time to like build that industry at the beginning. But then there's these like iterations, right, that come up, and then cars were made out of metal, and that was like very dangerous, and they're like hard shell cars, and like not very safe for people. And now cars are made out of like very light material because they're people centered, right? Like if you crash a car, you can replace a car, but you can't replace a person. And so like, is there this like natural evolution in industries that like get us to reconsider like people and people centered industries that we're seeing in social media platforms? Is like that the take, or is that not the take?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So I basically think that with social media, it's kind of I think the best way to just describe it is that there's too much monopoly when it comes to social media,
Mm,
because I feel like Meta has basically just like monopolized like the social media like space and made themselves like the creator of like the best and the most used social media apps. Because if you notice, like Instagram was not initially owned by Meta. Meta acquired it, I think, in 2018, 2017. I can't really recall. But in the early days of Instagram, it was founded by I think Mike Krieger, and it was a totally different app. And Instagram had a different like focus, which was a photo sharing platform where people could basically share photos. And over
mhm,
time,
mhm.
Meta
I
acquired it.
remember the
Meta also
cringy
acquired
filters.
WhatsApp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And Meta also, I think they had plans of, also acquiring Snapchat from even, Spigo. But basically, I think even didn't, accept the deal. And I felt like, Meta kept on, acquiring all the major social media platforms. And now it just feels like a monopoly where, Meta decides like how the social media, platform should be. And they basically like introduce like, new features. And I feel like the problem also is that there's no competition, so they're still like the most used platforms. I felt like TikTok was the only major like competition that Meta has had in years. Like all the early on like competitions, like Meta eventually acquired them, except from Snapchat. So I felt like over time they just like had monopoly off of like of like all the major social media apps, which is a problem in itself because like
Mm,
they definitely need competition, and platforms that show them that that is not the only model, that you need to basically pull in users, and also like and obviously we cannot say like the platform should make profit, because obviously they definitely need to make profit off of like their platforms, because obviously like we really can't tell them what profit what revenue model is best for like their platform. But I also definitely think that it's really important that you know they have like other platforms that really challenge their position as like the go-to social media, because they really need to be shown that there's another way to this. We need more
mm,
public interest social media. We need more social media that actually cares about the well-being of the users, and it's not about like
mm,
making as much money from them and just like making money from their attention. People have had like their mental health decline off of like excessive social media use. People have gotten like scammed or cyberbullied or
Mm-hmm.
doxxed on these platforms, and even like large scale human rights crises have happened in countries like Myanmar due to like Facebook and the social media platforms. Unfortunately, due to like the revenue model that they have choose to basically make use of, they've actually caused like real life harm on people, and it's basically just like devastating because the goal was to connect people, to get you as
Yeah.
much friends as possible, to
Mm.
make your voice heard or make you feel relevant. And it's really sad that they really just like shifted their model along the way, like to um to help you with that. The focus now is make as much money as possible, please our shareholders, introduce like features people don't really need. Like if you go on Instagram now, there are so many features that you're like, why did you have this? Like nobody asked for this. Like people always complain, like they're always like plugging the platform, like features that they really feel like it's not really necessary to the app. Like even WhatsApp, like they introduced like recent platforms called channels, and a bunch of like really irrelevant like features that I really don't know like the use, because like now the platforms don't even really seem too different from each other. They just have different names. It basically feels like they all serve like the same purpose now, and they just all have different names. Like TikTok has an algorithm, Instagram has an algorithm, YouTube has an
Mm.
algorithm. So you're basically like, like okay, like what the hell? Like everything is just like the same now. And I think that's the problem. And I just really love that a new generation of like innovators are like, no, we can't keep letting Meta get away with this. We can't keep letting big tech get away with this. We really need like a new approach to like how we basically do social media, and how we want users to feel using our platforms, because social media has had like a really serious impact on the mental health of a lot of young people.
Yeah.
A lot of young people are dealing with like severe mental issues due to like social media induced stress, and has also caused like an issue of like doom scrolling, where people are constantly like trying to get updates about like everything that's going on around the world. So it's just like it's just like a really like crazy situation. It's just like a really crazy situation. But honestly, I definitely feel like I just love the fact that a new generation of like innovators are basically just like doing the work and basically making sure that they can really transform the space.
I think there's a really exciting part to like Gen Z being at a point now, in aging, I guess is like the way to describe it, where they are builders now, right? And they're a generation that is building off of an existing infrastructure that they have a lot of opinions about. Like, I think, and a really keen understanding, because if it weren't for these social platforms, like I would be very I would be very skeptical of like there being any possibility of folks like us connecting, right? Like, I think it would be very difficult for us to kind of expect to be able to connect with folks doing similar work, having some similar passions across the world, right? And I do think there is some value in that, like connecting with folks on social platforms. I do think it's getting harder. And I think it's like, as an organizer and as someone that's done a lot of advocacy and movement building in the US at a national level, there's kind of a pattern that like you recognize in social movements, right? And in advocacy work, where there's kind of like an initial response, there's a counter response, and it's kind of that pendulum, but there is like movement forward. It like inches forward, right, as this pendulum swings. And in this social media revolution, because I think that's kind of what it is, and there's like a literal sense to that if you think about like how social media has also like impacted a lot of like revolutionary movements across the world, for better or for worse. There is a huge opportunity, and I think a responsibility, that Gen Z and Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, like all the generations that are going to come up after us, a huge responsibility that each one of them will have to learn from the mistakes we make. Because I'm pretty sure every generation will continue to kind of, you know, evolve on like an existing framework, but fall short of like what our evolving needs are every generation. And so I I get really excited by like the notion that there are folks like you who are like making us really pay attention to like the issues with the existing frameworks, the algorithm biases or like the hypercentralization, like the mental health implications. And we were talking about burnout and like dependency, doom scrolling. These are issues that are causing a mental health crisis in our generation, right? Those numbers are really staggering. But but I think there's also then like the hard question of how do you balance a world that is kind of telling us that they want to be a little bit more isolationist. I think we're seeing that in a lot of countries right now, where there's like a movement to kind of like nationalize identity and move away from being interconnected as like global citizens. With I guess I should like paint the picture a little bit better. So I will say I think social media platforms provide a centralization to community that is valuable, like understanding lived experience on a personal level all over the world, I think is really valuable. And I will say like the content that I do like is when I'm able to like see somebody's life in another country, in another culture, in another reality that I would not be exposed to otherwise. I think there's something really like valuable and human about being able to like identify with an individual. But like marketing, branding, and like product placement is not a part of that when I think about it, right? Like the true value, like human value of connecting. I think that is like a part of a solution to addressing isolationism and nationalism as it creates like hostility and leads to conflict in the world. So I do really value that from like global social media platforms. How do you balance that? This is the question I'm trying to get to. How do you balance that with like wanting to see evolution in these platforms? Is it like, is it really looking to new iterations of platforms and new builders to say like we need a connectedness, we need like a global connectedness, but we need to like regulate the way we're marketing, or we need to put limitations on like the way that products are incorporated into like story sharing? Like what is kind of the vision there? Because there has to be a balance, right? Like I guess that's what we're all kind of trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's a really important question because I also consider myself a global citizen. I feel
Hmm.
like I never really just like identified more with like my country or have like this sort of like nationalist mentality. Like I've always seen myself like as a part of the world and also like try to address like global issues and try to understand like our shared be a part of like a collective humanity that is trying to make the world a better place for one another. So I definitely think like as a global citizen, I think social media is really important because it exposes you to like so much because it educates you about like so many like so many cultures, so many social issues, so many contexts that you have never really been in, and it just like makes you feel like a part of the world. So I feel like
Mm.
as a global citizen, social media has been a really relevant because like I've definitely used it. It's exposed me to like so many ideas. I learned about like historical movements and social justice issues, and basically a lot of things just off of like social media. So I definitely think like I would definitely say social media still plays a major role in connecting the world. Social media has helped like people would have been unknown get discovered, from advocates to musicians to like unique talents. So I definitely think like social media has also made more people like globally aware and just like aware of like things that they really wouldn't have known if we relied on like legacy media to still be like our main source of information and newspapers. So I definitely think like social media has also like broken that like social media has broken that sort of like gatekeeper that is like preventing us to see certain things. And we basically thanks to social media we get to see like the world through like a filter or through like a certain lens. So I would definitely say like I would give social media that. So like if you're a global citizen, like this is the best era of like human the trajectory of like human history to basically live in, because like you basically just like get a chance to connect with the rest of the world just like off of like your digital phone, your mobile phone, or like your laptop. But I also feel like one of the many cons is that social media has also sort of like worsened like misinformation and disinformation in the past. Basically, like anytime like fake news got spread, it only like got spread to like a really small like segment of people or people who read like a particular kind of like newspaper. But now social media and just like technology has really just like made citizen journalism a thing, where basically like now citizens are making themselves like a source of like information, or sharing information and news updates. And I think now social media has made it seem like anybody can be a journalist, anybody can be a
Mm-hmm.
creator. So now people are taking matters into their hands, and that has actually worsened like misinformation, disinformation, and
Mm-hmm.
polarization. Especially in the United States, we're seeing like more polarization between the Republicans and the Democrats, and even people who are centrist, or people who identify as independent. And social media has played a role in this, because like on social media, we never really see like nuanced perspectives on political issues. We oftentimes see like the most extreme like liberal opinions and the most extreme conservative opinions, and that really causes like a lot of backlash and resentment. Like, oh, why do you think this? Or why do you think people shouldn't use pronouns at school? Or why do you think they have to read the Bible at school? Like it's just like two extremes, when everyday people in everyday in everyday life, people have like different opinions. Not every like liberal person thinks the same. Not every conservative person holds the same opinions. And social media definitely just like erases that nuance, and it's more of like an echo chamber. Like a lot of people are in algorithmic echo chambers. Social media says that when social media says that you engage with a certain kind of content, or you have a certain type of belief, you kept on getting fed information and sort of like content and information and updates that really just like reinforce your worldview. So for example, if you already think like all Republicans are evil and terrible and want to destroy America and don't believe in, solving the climate crisis, you constantly want to be, updated about like content that really justifies like that worldview. Like, oh yeah, I said this exactly. And if you're like, on the other side too, you also want things that just like justify like this other, group of people are really bad. And I feel like social media has also really stoked like fear and just like growing hatred towards like minority groups, immigrants, LGBTQIA people in the United States, and which I think it's a major problem, because like I've seen so many like misinformed like news updates go viral, or like sensationalist headlines, and you just wonder like, wow, like this just went viral. Nobody even took the time to verify like, is this information true?
Right.
Everybody just like ran with like, oh, this happened. A good example was like a Moroccan, yeah, I think it was a Moroccan like during the Olympics there was a Moroccan boxer, a female boxer, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody started the rumor that she is trans, and she was competing in it's sort of like a tournament that was meant for like cis women, and she won solely because of the fact that she was biologically male. Sort of that, but it was totally false. She is
Mm-hmm.
female, but the rumor spread, and politicians were reposting it. Even
Mm-hmm.
what's the name of this famous writer, the woman behind like the Harry Potter series, she also reposted, and it turned into like
Mm-hmm.
a major like sensational a
Yeah.
major like spectacle. A lot of people were discussing about it, and the person that was in the middle of all of this mess, really got like a lot of like hate comments, targeted
Right.
bullying, and it's just like really devastating to see like people amplify rumors and lies that can really
Right.
just like put people in danger. That's like a perfect example of like one of the many
Yeah.
problems with like social
You.
media and people having access to like having
Yeah.
access to just like share any information.
You use a word there, which I think is really uh, really like characteristic of this situation that we face with social media, which is amplify. I think social media platforms amplify, right? They amplify education, they amplify news, they amplify misinformation, they amplify hate, they amplify division, they amplify everything, right? Everything you put on there, potentially, particularly because of the way that algorithms work, could go viral. We know, and we've actually done some conversations on this as well, with some great partners around misinformation campaigns, the way that they're built, kind of the historical context of misinformation campaigns and disinformation. And my takeaway from that conversation was, misinformation and disinformation campaigns have existed as long as humans have been able to communicate. The difference that we see now with social media platforms and with the Internet of Things is that the the rapidness with which these campaigns can spread and impact and cause physical reactions is much faster, right? Because of social media. We also know that like the algorithms particularly have a bias towards like amplifying and creating like virality from sensationalized or very triggering negative content. And so those things spread faster. And so like there is a concern there that I have around like how certain information spreads faster, and that is the information that can be more harmful. But I think there's this like amplification reality, right? And it kind of tests us, I think, as a society. Like, how do we deal with the fact that like this new like method of engagement for people, social media platforms and their algorithms that they operate on, amplify all the parts of us, and expedite like the speed with which they're spread to people. I think this is like an interesting progression over the last 100 years, because we saw it. Like the world changed when like the printing press was invented, and like people like suddenly had access to like writing at a massive scale, right? It became a lot more like normal for people to know how to read. And then the world changed again when like radio came into play, and people were able to share their opinions to wider networks as well. And there's like a fun little tidbit of information there with radio, which was, there's a strong correlation with radio coming into the world, and people having radios in their home, and a rise in fascism historically, like in the early 1900s. Like early mid 1900s. And in the United States, we actually started to see some of that, which is where like the regulatory frameworks that came about from that started to kind of better control who was producing, who had access to these radio waves, the kind of content they were putting out. With social media, kind of like by design, the regulatory frameworks are a little bit different. And that policy infrastructure is very like sporadic in the United States, because we have like, and we're actually doing some reporting right now on this, and we'll have some publications go out over the summer. We have like a policy infrastructure that says platforms are within their right, almost as like publication businesses, to censor content that they want to on their platforms, right? So they can take something down, and it's like it is fully within their like right to do so according to our existing policy, because it's their platforms. Simultaneously, our existing policy framework also says they're not liable for anything that individuals post on their platforms, because they're open platforms. And so I do think that there's a lot of conversation still that needs to be had around the way that we are evolving our policies to also create a standard for how we are able to post, and like what the fact checking infrastructure is to these platforms. Because we saw a huge shift from like fact checkers, which were, I think, the standard at Meta for a long time, to now kind of like a community notes based system that modeled what X has now. And there's a lot of questions around who gets to provide input to these community notes, and like how are they selected, and do they have biases in the way that they like identify things as factually correct or incorrect, and then how is that dealt with by the actual platforms. And so there is a big policy conversation there as well, and it's going to be like the responsibility of Gen Z to really look critically at that existing policy infrastructure and ask, what is the right balance here? for having like an openness that facilitates like community conversation, with like strong like free speech principles, which I would say are important, right? Like I think that's an important like principle, but also like incorporate like fair like fact-based reporting. Yeah, I don't know. Interested to get your like thoughts on that too, right? On the policy side of things.
Yeah, thank you so much for that those insights that you shared, Jose. I definitely think it's really important that social media puts more of an effort because like they're doing things to actually tackle this problem. Like I'll give them that they're already making efforts to actually tackle issues like misinformation, disinformation. Like I've noticed that Instagram has gotten like a lot stricter now, and TikTok have TikTok recently had it like more new rules to their community guidelines, which includes like taking down content that spreads like hate or sensational like news updates. And I would definitely give them that. But at the end of the day, I still definitely feel like big tech needs to be held more accountable, and policymakers and those in positions of power to actually address this issue definitely also do have a role to play, because I feel like at the end of the day, like they're not going to, we cannot just like give big tech all the power to basically do as they please. We really need to have policies in place. And I was really like shocked that there were really few policies and just like laws that really basically just like set like guidelines and basically just like just basically just like moderate how big tech operates. I was really stunned that some states don't even have like any laws or policies that protect children on their this like social media platforms. Like recently, states like Minnesota and California have been considering like laws and policies that really focus on protecting young people that are using social media apps. Australia recently passed a law that young people under the age of 16 cannot use this like platforms like social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter. And a lot there's also been like a lot of backlash between like the public, which is like people who think young people should be on social media, and it's like a form of censorship because they believe that young people should have access to these platforms and access to information. There's also people that really just like care about like the safety and the well-being of young people, who really think like what if we put young people on social media, but there should be moderation and laws that really protect young people using those platforms. And there's also a group of people who really don't want young people on the platforms because they're really unsafe. And now on this social media platform, like we have like young people under the age of like 16 getting interacting with people over the age of like 30, and
Yeah.
it's really unsafe because like not everybody is a safe person to be able to just like interact with or getting so I've gotten the opportunity to interact with people on TikTok's safety team. We have had conversations, and TikTok has definitely made significant efforts, and I really love the fact that they've been consulting young people like me and young people from around the world, basically getting our inputs and our insights on how they can make their platforms better. They have made like they've made like features that make it impossible for like adults to reach out to anybody under the age of 18. They made it like they've started like making sure that accounts of like minors are private, or they get like proper consent from their parents before they actually allow them to start posting content. They cannot go live, and I just like really love to see that these platforms are starting to make these changes, because we really need to ensure that young people and everybody in general has a really great experience on this platform. And this is also a form of digital equity, because like marginalized groups are more likely to have like really terrible and difficult experiences on this social media platforms. And I just really think policies are still like struggling to catch up, and we definitely need. And I just love that coalitions and groups like Designing for Us and organizations and just like youth groups are starting to like just like step up, accountable tech, and it's just like starting to see like these organizations are like, no, we can't keep going like this. We need to start holding big tech accountable. I just like really love to see the energy of this generation, but unfortunately, like even in Congress or in the Senate, like most of them are not representative of Gen Z. A lot of them are older than the age of 30. Like they're way older. They don't understand like the new the issues that this new generation is facing in the digital world. And even though they might empathize with us, they're still like struggling to catch up and understand like how timely and how urgent these issues are and why they need to act now. it shouldn't be until we hear that, a kid committed suicide that we have to rethink how young people use social media. It shouldn't be that, somebody got, extorted, or a girl got, became a victim of human trafficking due to social media use, that we realize, oh, this is a serious issue we need to actually solve. So I definitely believe that we definitely need more youth voices, not just like heard or talking eyes or given a platform once and, no follow-ups. We need more young people drafting these policies. We need more young people, speaking up in Congress. So yeah, so just more youth.
I love that you said follow up there, because like as an organization, Zeta is on Capitol Hill at least like 3 times a week. Like we are actively, and I was on Capitol Hill this morning, meeting with folks, to talk about like, connectivity issues, to talk about data rights work, to talk about, all of these different things that we're working on. And it is important to have consistency. And one of the things that as like a young generation, you will naturally struggle with is having the resources and the capacity and the bandwidth to be consistently present. But it's so important to be consistently present when you're dealing with a finite number of staff, right, for 535 offices in the House and in the Senate, who are working on so many different issues, and are working, their butts off to stay on top of all of these conversation points. The question comes up: how are they preparing, their understanding and materials around the perspective of Gen Z and younger people? And a part of that, like a part of the natural way that, like, again, talking about like attention, right? Like our ability to focus in on things, a part of how that stays top of mind and priority for them is our consistent presence, like our consistent ability to show up. And that's why that's a really core part of our model, like engaging our staff, our members in Congress consistently, every single day that we can, engaging them, talking to them about the conversations we're having, like this one, and keeping them in the loop on these important perspectives so they understand a couple of things. Gen Z has a perspective. They have an organized voice. These are their priorities that are important to them. And they're going to vote on these, on the lines of like these priorities. And so that is ultimately like the way that you build, like a priority for members that are elected, that are voted in, is creating that really strong channel of engagement. I think I'm slightly biased in saying that because I've spent the last 10 years like doing nothing but that, right? Building channels of advocacy with federal policy stakeholders for community. Very, very seldom saw a lot of youth-led and youth-driven advocacy work that was so consistent. Most of the times it's a little bit more tokenization of like, we need to do this thing. We're going to bring in some kids. We're going to give them some talking points. We're going to give them like these handouts to go and like smile and show that they're children, that they're kids, like advocating for this thing. And then they get sent home, and then like they never hear about how their efforts made an impact or what the follow-up is to that ever again. And I've seen that happen also time and time again. And it's one of the reasons why Zeta, it was really important for us to build out like a young community-led, like Gen Z-led voice that was so focused on the federal policy education, and creating channels for Gen Z to go and engage our federal policy stakeholders, was because we didn't want to continue to see young people just be tokenized in the way that they're engaged and brought to that engagement in DC. And I think that's really important. It's hard to do that, but it's really important to like educate and to then mobilize, but then follow up. Going back to the note you made, the follow-up is the important piece, because you have to keep engaging. Like if you are having a productive conversation with somebody working on policy at a federal level, at a state level, at a local level, you're walking out of each conversation with next steps, with action items, with a vision forward, and you have more, like, there is always a reason to come back. Otherwise, you're just kind of coming to like express an opinion, but again, like they're like, it's that priority is going to leave their attention as they're bombarded with more issues, other perspectives. So I wanted to touch on that because I really see you, like your voice, the communities that like you organize, that you mobilize, as really, really important factors. Certainly, like every time that we're engaging with folks on the Hill, it is very powerful to say, like, look at all of these organizations, look at all of these leaders that are up here or that are putting out this content. And I'm smiling because, like, when we're up there, we'll share content from you all as well, and we've amplified the content that we've seen from other young voices, because they need to be reminded every single day that they can be reminded that there are young people mobilizing on these issues. I want to ask a question around like the value driven nature of Gen Z, right? Like I do really, really believe that Gen Z is very values driven. I think that's maybe one of the like positive impacts of being hyper connected, is that they're very values driven, and they're very quick to spot like disingenuous, like, I think like voice. And my question is, how do we tap into that Gen Z values driven mindset to build healthier digital communities?
Yeah. Thanks for that question, because like I really love the fact we're centering, Gen Z, because they're really relevant to the concept of digital well-being. I definitely think like more young Gen Z and just young people in general are starting to realize, wow, social media might have had might has had like such a major effect and just like impact on not only like our individual well-being, but like on how we socialize, how we see the world, how we connect, how we engage with one another, whether or not we engage in civic, our motivation to be civically engaged. And to just realize, what if we transformed, like, what if we urge like the platforms to transform, basically how young people engage with them, and also basically what they can really do to support young people who are navigating our digitally connected world, and which I really admire. I feel like the concept of digital well-being is still quite niche. A lot of people don't even realize that digital well-being is necessary, especially if you're a digital citizen. You're engaging, with you're engaging in digital spaces. You definitely need to understand, like, digital well-being, and also how to have digital etiquette. But oftentimes people just think, oh, I'm just going online. They never really see it as like something that they really need to develop, like etiquette and how to mindfully make use of it, and also not just like mindfully but also ethically make use of technology. And I definitely started to see more efforts to basically share like tech and AI literacy. And I think that's like really important, because like people need to understand, because I feel like the issue is that when people don't understand something well, they might not really realize like how it affects them. So I've definitely seen like organizing, for example, Stanford has like an initiative called Good for Media. It's a really incredible initiative. It's really focused on just like supporting young people who care about digital well-being. Initiatives to just like amplify efforts to promote digital well-being and support young people, who are tackling issues related to like online safety or digital wellness or promoting digital etiquette. So it's really important that young people in this, like, more young people are encouraged, like, we live in like a digital world now. So you should be more encouraged to, get more people to become aware, like, tech can have an impact on you. It can have an impact on how you see the world.
Oh, no, we lost him. All right. Well, that is okay. Lucas, I'm actually curious to answer some of these questions in the chat and see if maybe we can get Tariq to come back online. I know he was having a little bit of tech issues just before we got started, but I think it's a really interesting conversation, right? And I really appreciate like all of the critical thought that like we're bringing to the topic. Appreciate like the discussion that's been brought up in the chat. I think I've been doing my best to bring in some of these components into the conversation as we've been going. Looking at a couple of these questions here, what are the methods, or what methods are there for generations to disconnect from this overstimulating digital world without being socially outcasted out of the loop? I think that's an excellent question. And one of the things that we've explored in conversation with some of the folks that we've been able to interact with in this space are the introduction of technologies that are actually looking to simplify the way that we're engaging. So, for example, we have new phone products that are looking to actually eliminate some of the some of the tools and gadgets that the phones that we have now that we're accustomed to or are starting to get accustomed to maybe are overwhelming, right? And so we have things like the simple phones that are coming out now that they're not old phones, but they're just new phones that don't have certain apps, or they just don't have all of the tools that now we're kind of accustomed to from like our smartphones as a means of kind of disconnecting more intentionally. Hey, Tariq, I just saw that you came back. That's awesome. I was just taking a look at one of the questions here in the chat. What methods are there for generations to disconnect from the overstimulating digital world without being socially outcasted or out of the loop? I was naming some of the tech that we're seeing with phones that are a little bit more simple with intention, to give people an option to stay connected through a mobile device without necessarily having all of the apps there to like constantly stimulate them, right? I think the other thing that like I personally have tried to be more mindful of incorporating in my day-to-day life is just timing myself a little bit more and being a little bit more reserved with my time, to where I have like specific points in the day where I am just not with my phone. And I've found that to be really refreshing. But Tariq, I would love to, like, before we keep diving into the questions, I would love to go back to the points you were making. Happy to open up the floor so that we can kind of give you an opportunity to speak to the conversation, and then we can go back to the questions from the audience.
Well, yeah. So I really love what we're talking about. I definitely think like digital well-being is a journey, like the journey to basically embrace like digital well-being and also like mindfully use tech, because like we live in like tech. Our lives are now very digitalized. Where we have our smartphones, we're constantly getting notifications. So I definitely think it can be very difficult to have like that balance. But I definitely think it's a journey. Like it starts like small. Basically just like daily, just like have like like you try like 30 minutes no phone, for every like 3 hours, like 30 minutes no phone break. And just like having those like small habits, no phone when you're having dinner or like lunch, or just basically those small habits, like as you start to like embrace those habits from time to time, they just become like the norm. Like it doesn't even feel like habits, it just feels like the normal thing you do. So I definitely think like for a lot of people, I feel like people just like try to abstain from tech and make like drastic major life changes at first, and they realize, oh, I'm still addicted, I still want to scroll on TikTok. Well, it doesn't work like that. Like I feel like you really have to train your brain and your mind to say, oh, I really want to change this. Like I really don't want to be too addicted to my to screens. So I have to like make so you have to like just like make yourself take this like really small steps, like baby steps. Like you don't have to say, oh, I'm not going to be on my phone, or I'm going to delete all social media apps, because like sometimes like you might, after like a while, where you feel compelled to basically go back to like your old like ways or habits, you might feel bad, like, oh, like I really made this like choice to use social media less, or use my phone or digital devices less. So I definitely think it's like a process. So digital well-being is like a long-term process, because like we're in a world filled with like digital noise, constant updates, constant notifications, news updates. So basically, you have to really train your body and your mind to say, oh, I really need to shut off all the noise, and today no phones, and also take like long digital detoxes where you go like days or weeks without no phones. You can spend it like hiking or learning a new skill, or embracing new hobbies, or basically just like trying new things that do not revolve around like a screen, or using your phone, or interacting with people on social media. So yeah.
Yeah, I love those points, especially the point about like connecting with nature. And I know that that's not an opportunity everybody has. There can be barriers to accessing natural spaces, or to kind of getting away from urban areas and kind of distancing yourself from some of the hyperconnectivity. But I think it is a wonderful option for people, and I certainly value my time when I'm far enough away that I'm not necessarily able to receive all of the notifications. But I think you're right. It starts with just like consciously putting down your phone a little bit more and saying like, I'm gonna go on a walk and I'm gonna leave my phone here, and I'm just gonna go like 20 minutes without having my phone. Or like playing around with the kind of tech that you're walking around with, wearing. I think there's a lot of value in being more intentional about that, and I think that's where the work of Log Off becomes so important, because this generation needs to have a hard, long conversation with itself around the standards that we want to set for this digital world, because the world is only going to get more connected, right? AI is exacerbating and amplifying a lot of the things that we talked about today, from disinformation campaigns. I'm sure people have seen all of the AI generated like tsunami content from the last like 24 hours, which is like it's still to the point where it's funny because a lot of it's not very good. But it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get more convincing, which will cause problems. It already is causing problems. But I think we're fortunate enough that like Gen Z is a little bit better at spotting some of that initially. But they're going to get better. Like these things are going to get better. It's going to make these campaigns that are spreading falsehoods more difficult to deal with, right? And so we do have to have a big conversation as a generation about what we're going to do about this, and all of the implications that come with that. It's been a pleasure like having this conversation with you, Tariq, because there's so much to explore here. But certainly it gives me hope to have this conversation, and I really look forward to all of the work that you all will continue to do, the work that you'll continue to lead, because I think it's certainly going to be a part of a new iteration of connectivity for our generation. I really do think it'll be very impactful. And so this has been really informative for me. I hope that in all of the outreach that we do constantly to our folks, to our generation, but then also to our policymakers and folks that work in policy, that this provides some valuable information to them as well, and that they start to follow your work even more closely. And so we will definitely connect everything that we can around the work that you're doing, the initiatives that you all are leading, to this webinar once it's up on YouTube, so that folks can access all this information as well. But really just truly appreciate your time, Tariq, and happy to let you give us some closing thoughts.
Yeah, it was so nice engaging in this conversation with you, Jose. Like, I went through like all what Zed has done, really, inspired, because we definitely need more like people pushing conversations about technology and how it is playing, because tech plays a major role in modern society. It's a major aspect of our lives in the 21st century, and I definitely just like love the work that Zeta is doing to just like spark these conversations. And I'm just like really grateful that I got to have this conversation with you, Jose, because we need more spaces where young people are brought in and just like engage. And I feel like to address like these digital issues, we also need digital issues and issues related to like tech, and also a bit more humane tech. We also need to bring young people in and also like just like emphasize like intergenerational solidarity, because this is not a Gen Z thing. We also need like adults or people from like a totally different generation, whether you're a boomer or you're a millennial. Like, I know there's like a lot of like friction between the generations, like, people making fun of like, oh, we're not like the millennials, we're making fun of like, boomers. But I really think like we definitely need more intergenerational solidarity to address the tech issues, because issues like, AI generated content, it can cause disinformation, and that can lead to real world harms. And I definitely think like it should be a collaborative thing where Gen Z is making people from other generations more media literate, and it's like a collaborative effort to just make sure that every one of us have like positive experiences with technology and social media and digital devices, and just like create a culture where digital well-being is just like really emphasized. And I'm just like so grateful that I got to have this conversation with you, Jose, and just like thank you so much. And I really would love to just see the work that Zeta continues to do. So yeah.
Really appreciate your time, Tariq. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining this conversation. Really look forward to seeing you next month for our next Tech Talk. Until next time, thank you so much.